So I remember the first thing I ever heard my guitar teacher say in terms of teaching, once I got accepted into his program, was you have to sing through your guitar or you're just not worth listening to. So that was on the very first day of school. So that's pretty much what we worked on from then on out, singing through your guitar. And I certainly agree with his statement. His name is Robert Guthrie, by the way. I've made all kinds of videos about him. But what does that mean, singing through your guitar? And if you're not sure how to do it, what are some things that can help you learn to sing more through your guitar? Why is it even important? I think the reason it's important is it's a human thing. No matter what instrument that you play, if you trace its lineage, you're going to run into singing, humans singing with their voice eventually. That's where instruments come from. And if you're not doing that directly, like if you play, some type of percussion, well, in all likelihood you're going to be supporting some type of singing, okay? So it's basically what we want to do as humans when we play music, one way or the other. And I think if you listen to a great player of any style of music, they know how to sing. They are singing. And they know how to do all the things that we are talking about here today in just the way that they want, to make up the style and the way that they want to sound. So, if you're not sure how to sing through your guitar, what are some things that might help you? I'm going to list 4. So the first one is, consider every sound that you make as part of your voice. Every sound. It can be easy to focus on the sounds you want to make, or kind of the main part of your sound, but not the things that kind of happen around the sound, or maybe in between the sounds, or things that you wish weren't there, so you just kind of don't really notice them. You just kind of gloss over them in your mind, okay? Think about it like an actual singer. If a singer was singing a line and their voice cracked, well, you'd hear it. It'd be part of the sound. If a singer was singing and they had like a scratchy throat or phlegm in their throat, you would hear that. It would be part of their tone, part of their sound, okay? Same thing with us. If you're playing guitar, and if you're playing especially like classical or steel string, let's mention a few things that can get in the way of your sound, or just things that you want to be aware of. And then you can decide, well, I'm going to use these in my sound, or I need to get rid of them. So a really easy one, and I'm going to use a famous Spanish guitar piece as an example today. Okay, a really easy one is squeaking. So when you got the bass strings, they're wound, they can easily make a squeak. Okay, something like that. Now, some people, they don't mind squeaking in their sound. They just work it into their tone of voice. Other people decide, no, I don't want those sounds in my playing. It's not part of my tone of voice. So it's not that one is right or wrong. It's just that you need to decide. Decide, yeah, squeaking is okay, and it gives it a certain type of feel. Or decide, no, it actually gets in the way of what I'm trying to say, so I'm going to take it out. If you want to take it out, it is kind of simple, although it can be difficult to do. All you have to do is change your technique. Okay, your technique at this point is when you move, your fingers are anchored to the string and you get the squeak. So all you have to do is remember to relax your finger so that it lifts off the string. You don't get a squeak, okay, especially on the bass strings. Another thing that might get in the way is the ends of our notes. It's easy to focus on the beginning of the note, right? But the note isn't done once we play it. We might get a line like this, and the end of the note might not be clean. So if we are just thinking, yeah, I played that note, I'm done with it, we might be making sounds in our tone of voice that we're not aware of and that we don't want. So we want to control the note all the way to the end, no matter what we're playing. Okay? And really listen for the note from beginning to end. So you can make things smooth, you can make them connected, and you're not getting any sounds of kind of relaxing too harshly, and you might get an open string or something like that, or you might get a weird buzz because you kind of lift off the string not in a deliberate way, and you get this kind of in-between note, kind of like a buzz. So we can clean those things up if we are paying attention to the ends of our notes, okay? And if you're going to practice something like scales, this is a great time to do it. Long, big sounds. Add some vibrato. Hold the note out and control it to the end. And then don't play the next one until you're absolutely ready, and you pretty much just run them right into each other, okay? Unless you're going for something in particular. So consider everything you do part of your sound, okay? It might be nail clicks on this hand. It might be just anything that makes a noise that you are not intending to make. And then you just have to decide, is this in line with the sounds that I'm going for, or are they not? If it is, then why change it? If they're not, then change your technique to take them out, okay? So that's kind of the first thing. The second thing is, every time I pick up the guitar and play any kind of note, anything, I'm always going for a certain type of sound. A basic sound that achieves a few general things that I want to do on the guitar. So if my friend gets a new guitar and they're like, hey, you want to play this guitar? And I pick it up and I just make some sounds, I'm still going for a very particular type of hand position, okay? And so I'm going to give you some examples because I think we should always shoot for some type of sound, okay? Of course, when you play music, you can choose whatever sound that you like and you can combine them. I mean, there's no rules. But until we kind of have some basic sounds very firmly in our technique, then what do we use to go off of? We use random approaches is what we do. Some kind of, random move that will get you some kind of sound, but not in line with what's in your mind and what you want to bring out in the guitar. So I almost used to think of it like an electric guitar. Because an electric guitar, you have pickups. I grew up playing Les Paul, so you have the two pickups, right? And you've got the switch. So you're going to be like in the neck pickup, which is bright and really clear. Or sorry, that was the bridge pickup, rather. That's bright and clear. The neck pickup is darker and fuller. Okay, and then both of them together is kind of in between. So it's almost like that. But what I'm going to talk about today is not so much moving your hand, is more the hand position and the general sound that you might shoot for. So here are three that I might shoot for, okay, in general. The first is general free stroke. So that means my I, M, and A fingers are here, and thumb polices these lower bass strings. So I'm going to shoot for a deep sound, but kind of on the bright side and pretty clear. If I use this hand position. So if I play a chord, it'll be this hand position. If I play an arpeggio, this hand position. And I might do it for a melody, a free stroke melody. Okay, so any of those types of things, I'm going to be going for that sound. Okay, kind of bright and clear. A second hand position that I might go to is rest stroke. So usually with rest stroke, I'm going to use I and M fingers, and I'm going to lean my hand back. I'm going to push the strings into the guitar. I might rest my thumb on the string. I might rest it on the top of the guitar. And the sound I'm looking for is deep, is full and round, and technically probably slightly less clear. I mean, I'm not looking for muddy, but it's probably a little bit less clear than free stroke. So if I play like a scale and I want a big sound, I'm probably going to use the rest stroke. If I'm going to play a nice melody and I don't need the thumb, then probably maybe rest stroke. Okay, so that's a sound I might go for. And then the last one is thumb position. So for me, thumb position means fingers are out of the equation, and my wrist is elevated, my thumb is just really pulverizing the string, okay? Probably gonna be rest stroke, and I'm looking for deep sounds, maybe a little bit of aggression, you know, not like a flamenco player really, but just a little bit of chirpiness, and usually something on the lower strings. If I have something on the lower strings, I'll probably use thumb instead of fingers. Okay, so typically I will go to one of those three: general free stroke, deeper, rounder rest stroke, or, you know, kind of slightly aggressive, loud, full thumb position. And if I'm not going to one of those three, then it's kind of something in between, okay, or something I'm going for in particular. But even just trying out a sound, I will pick one. And then if it's a musical passage, then it depends on what you need. Okay, can it all be free stroke? Do you need to throw in some rest strokes? Is it a thumb position thing? And, you know, when do you combine them? And then you can just have fun from there, you know, seeing what you want to do. So that's the second thing. Always choose a sound. Of course, choose a sound before you play a piece. But even if you're just going to play a note on the guitar, choose a sound. Go for a tone of voice, and go for your best tone of voice. The third thing is use subtle dynamics all the time. Always. Your playing should always be on a dynamic spectrum. And you can really do anything. But if you play the guitar, especially like classical guitar, nylon string, subtle dynamics are something it does extremely well. And so we just want to live there all the time. And we want to get used to thinking that way. And what it will do to your listener, I think, if you can use subtle dynamics all the time, it's not like they'll walk away thinking, oh my goodness, he used dynamics all the time. I never heard a note without dynamics. No, they'll probably just walk away thinking, well, he sounded really musical. Like, it sounded good, it sounded nice. Because you can use them without being extreme, just to give things a nice shape and kind of a natural shape, kind of a flow. So let's go back to this famous Spanish piece and use it as an example, okay? Now, if you were going to sing this, you know, that might give us a good clue to the dynamic inflection that it needs. And you don't have to be an adept singer to sing your music, and you should sing your music. So if I was going to sing this line, I would go da 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 da. Okay. Now when I do that, da 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 da, kind of naturally my voice goes a little louder as I go up, and then it relaxes when I sing that last note, which is the lowest one. Da 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 da. So you might find yourself doing kind of musical things like that just innately with your voice. So then you want to play your piece and see if you can mimic that. Let's pretend I sang it that way and I was like, yeah, I like that inflection. It sounds very natural. But let's say I was playing it like this. Okay. So I was playing it like this. Da, 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 da. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, right? It's not very song-like, okay? Every note was the same, and it had just this beef to it, okay? So all we need to do is vary the dynamics. A good rule of thumb is the highest note probably should be the loudest, and then vice versa. Not all the time, but for basic simple melodies like this, it's definitely a good place to start. So we could take the line and play it on its own and make sure we can shape it that way. So we need to start out a little quiet. Next one needs to be a little bit louder. This one needs to be the loudest, and then relax. Somewhere in between, you know, I'm not sure the last note, but I would make it quieter than this note. So it sounds like a relaxing. We have the apex, and then, you know, the come down. And that's way differently shaped than everything being the same and kind of pulverized, which is easy to do. Now we add in all the notes. And it's got some shape to it, okay? So I've heard people say the phrase, don't ever play two notes at the same dynamic. And I think this is what they're talking about. It's not that you wouldn't ever play two notes at the same dynamic. Sometimes you want things to be flat across the board for different reasons. You know, something like that. I might want all those to be very loud and harsh, okay? Or you might practice scales, you know, kind of accenting every note to build your technique. Okay, but still, if you're doing that, you're doing it in the absence of a dynamic flow. So I think it still kind of creates a need for a constant, subtle manipulation of dynamics. If you're not doing scale practice with accenting every note, then I'd give it a dynamic flow. Just something, you know. Give it some shape, right? So get in the habit of always having this relativity of dynamics for subtle dynamics. And even if you're going to do something like, maybe you can play a wicked scale and you accent every note and it sounds awesome, you're still manipulating dynamics. It's just like every note is like maxed out. You know, it's like ultimate compression kind of thing. And you're manipulating it that way. But when I listen to, after years of listening to Paco de Lucia, I think when he plays one of his scales and he descends, he crescendos when he gets to the bass strings. Like he actually gets louder. And I think it gives it a whole different kind of effect. You know, listen to it and see what you think, if you think that's what he's doing or not. But I think that's what he's doing, and it just gives the ultimate macho effect. So something I realized about him, how masterful he was at using dynamics. And you might hear him play loud and aggressive and do all these things, but within that, he is still manipulating dynamics to an amazing degree to get the effects, the musicality that he wants. He was an amazing musician. He wasn't just the world's most athletic guitar player, right? So always manipulating dynamics and always subtly manipulating them, you know, from note to note. Last thing I'll say about that is you could, of course, do something dramatic, you know. Okay, you can, of course, do that, but you don't have to do that, right? And I would save those types of effects for the moments that really need them. And the rest of the time, I think subtle manipulation works really well. So that's the third thing. The last thing I'll say is practice being creative. Practice coming up with musical ideas. I mean, you can practice technique and you can practice your music so that, you know, you get stronger, you build endurance, the piece gets cleaner, you have it memorized, things like that. And we need to do all those things. But I think practicing being creative is pretty much its own thing. And think about the opposite. Let's say you build all these tools, but you don't ever practice being creative. What are you left with? You're left with non-creative, non-musical technique and execution. And this happens because, you know, some people don't understand how much you have to practice and work on an instrument. Some people understand it. Some people understand it really well, and that's a strength for them. So practicing technique for hours every day, you know, wood shedding and all that, they're up for it. And they're like, yeah, I can do this, right? But it has a pitfall. And that pitfall is putting all those things above, you know, musicality, being creative, what you can bring to the piece, you know, what's actually most important. And 10 out of 10 musicians will probably tell you, they don't always all act this way, but they'll probably tell you they would always prefer to hear a slightly less clean but musical performance with feeling than a technical, you know, example of an amazingly perfect piece with no feeling and no musicality, okay? So what we have to do is make sure that we practice that way. So practice coming up with new ideas, okay? Great thing to do. Let's take this same example. You can practice the melody on its own, like we've already kind of done. You can use different fingerings on different strings. And sometimes you can, you know, come up with maybe a spot where you want to do vibrato or a new tone of voice. Or a slide or something that just gives it life. And, you know, the way I would describe that is, if you don't find that in the music by doing this, how are you ever going to find it? Because typically someone might say, well, you know, of course I can do lots of vibrato if I'm only playing the melody. But you know, how am I going to do it here? And my answer to that is like, well, you'll do more, or a lot of times you will find a way, but you will never find a way if you don't give yourself that idea. If you don't realize, wow, it does sound really nice, and that first note, some vibrato on it sounds really nice. So I'm going to see how much I can get. So I don't think it's so much like, well, how do I do that with all the notes? It's that you will never do that with all the notes if you don't give yourself an environment to experiment and find new things, okay? Using different fingerings, different techniques, right? Free stroke, rest stroke, thumb, you know, whatever. And then the last thing I'll say is, if you need some musical ideas, if you're not sure where to start, then, you know, do your studying. Listen to other people play the piece. Listen to great players, but listen to all kind of people if you're looking for ideas, and try and copy what they do. You know, if you're worried you might sound like them, don't worry. You probably won't. I think it's really hard to do. You know, we're all very unique, and especially if they're a great player, chances are you won't sound like them. So try and get in there, try and feel some of the things they're feeling, and you'll still sound like you, and you'll have some ideas to use and to go off of, start shaping on your own, okay? Another good way to come up with ideas is to study the history of the piece, of the music, of the composer. This is really useful if you need help finding ideas. You know, when you look at a lot of music, you start to just kind of size it up and figure out, you know, what's going on, what are the most important elements. Like, you know, is this a rhythmic piece? You know, I'm going to keep it rhythmic, you know, so I'm going to play on that because that's what's there. Or is it a song-like piece, you know? So I'm going to play it so it sounds like a song. So that's what I'm going to play on, okay? But if you're not sure, listen to other people play it and study the history of the piece. That's a great way to get ideas, things to do. If you're really good at coming up with ideas, then I would say you don't have to do that. You know, if you feel really confident about bringing out what you think is really great about the music, I don't think it's essentially required. Most people would just be interested to know some backstory. What do people kind of do with this, you know? And then you can always make up your own mind. But it's also a great place to go if you need somewhere to start. You know, what do people typically do with this kind of music? And what do they take advantage of? What do we believe about the time period? Which is basically just kind of conjecture, because, you know, we don't have recordings for most of music history unless it was, you know, sometime in the 20th century. So a lot of it, we're just kind of making our best guess based on what people wrote and our interpretation of what they say on how to play their music, or music of the time. But this is a great way to get ideas, somewhere to start. And then you can see things like, oh, you know, this is a stylized dance, so I want to take advantage of this rhythm here. Or, oh, this is based off of a quote of a Renaissance piece of music, so very song-like, and I'm going to make it sound like a song. Just kind of things like that. And then you can always go from there. So I hope these things help you to make your playing sound more song-like, and that it just becomes a part of who you are and what you do all the time.